This is it, dudes. 2-point conversion. Justin Herbert's got the ball, fires over the middle. It's Gerald Everett! It's Gerald Everett! Gerald Everett's got the 2 points, and the Chargers take the lead! The Chargers take the lead! Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo, the Bull fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, victory Monday. Happy Monday to all of you guys. Oh, man, I'm still exhausted from that game. Every Chargers season ticket holder should be supplied with what? A pair of defibrillators with every purchase because, man, that game was definition of heart attack, dude. Very exhausting, but the Chargers got away with the win, so definitely a good day to be a Chargers fan. Honestly, I will say, though, with how slow that game started, I really started to accept our fate in the third quarter. I was like, I don't know, man. It feels like the play calling has just been that bad. It just feels like the run defense has been that bad. I don't know how we're going to pull ourselves out of this hole, but somehow behind the superstar Justin Herbert, the Chargers delivered a stellar performance to steal the win versus the Arizona Cardinals. So where does that leave us now? Well, the Chargers' chances at the postseason just went way up. So we're going to talk a lot about what happened in this game, what the Chargers' fate may look like going forward, and what they can do with the gathered momentum that they've gotten in this game versus the Cardinals. Now, before we do get started, guys, quick announcement. We have begun our next giveaway. We are giving away this brand new Justin Herbert jersey to one of my lucky subscribers. All you got to do is to enter is hit up the link in the description, follow the instructions there, very simple, and make sure you are subscribed. Only subs can win. But on top of that, of course, we do giveaways in twos around here. We're also giving away this Khalil Mack jersey to one of my crew members as a thank you from me to you guys. All you got to do to be entered for that is be a member of the crew, and that is it. The winner will be drawn around Christmas Eve. Thank you guys so much. Here's the director's holiday giveaway underway. Now with that, let's kick this one off. Before we do, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. Small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action. The Chargers at Cardinals, Week 12 post-game report. We'll call this one Survive, because the Chargers absolutely did survive this game, thus buying themselves more time to get their stars back, as well as dramatically improving their odds for the postseason. So before we actually jump into this, I almost forgot, shout out to our guys at Underdog Fantasy. We had a pretty fun weekend. One of our guys tweeted at me saying, hey, director, we just hit a $500 entry. Super excited to see the Bolt fam out there participating and having a good time. Be sure to use code director to match your first deposit up to $100 and get in on the action. These are the 4 players that I'm looking at right here. So with that, let's jump into the first talking point of this Victory Monday episode called the social media quarterback. I posted this on Twitter that right after the game, but if you still feel Justin Herbert is a social media quarterback and you know exactly who I'm talking to, be sure to go contact your local insane asylum and get checked in right away, as you do need professional help, because Justin Herbert is far and away not the problem here. Now, Justin Herbert on this game, again, carried this team. 312 total yards, good number of that being scrambling yards. 3 touchdowns for Justin Herbert. He is by far and away the reason the Chargers were able to stay ahead in terms of finding a way to win. I'm not going to say stay ahead on the scoreboard because the Chargers were playing from behind in the fourth quarter. But despite a lot of things going wrong for this team, Justin Herbert remains the one constant for them on offense, and he's been absolutely fantastic. And this is even despite 4 sacks on Justin Herbert. Again, before last week, this offensive line was actually looking pretty dang good, only allowing, I think, 15 sacks through 10 weeks at that point, which is definitely not bad. I think one of the least sacked quarterbacks in the NFL. Last week versus the Chiefs, they gave up 5. This week versus the Cards, we gave up 4. It's not looking good for Justin Herbert. He's having to be a little bit more creative in buying time to get his receivers open, escaping pressure, and even with that, 4 sacks made life pretty difficult on Justin Herbert. So that's something to keep in mind going forward. The offensive line, we're going to need to figure some stuff out, man. I know Matt Fowler's not having the best season. We're very much so missing Rashawn Slater, even though Jamari Sawyer has stepped in valiantly in his absence. The Chargers need to find a way to keep number 10 up on his feet, because he is the best chance possible for the Chargers to keep any postseason hopes alive. So yeah, If you're one of those people, or if you hear from people, even outside the Chargers fandom, about Justin Herbert, the slander we've heard this season because of the unfortunate circumstances the team has been under, be sure to stand up for number 10, man. Justin Herbert is not the problem here. We are lucky to have number 10 on this roster. Hopefully the team can continue building around him, designing around him to bring him more success, because in the end, we need to get those wins up. And the Chargers cannot let another Phillip Rivers story unfold in Los Angeles. Chargers fans do not want to see that. Justin Herbert has the talent to carry this team over the hump if we can just commit to building around him. And this was despite, by the way, almost forgot to mention this, despite a horrible start in the first quarter. We'll get more into that in just a second. But Justin Herbert with that kind of yardage, that kind of performance, despite a pretty absent first quarter for the Chargers, schematically is very, very impressive. So the social media quarterback strikes back. Next up, let's take a look at this segment called Use Your Stars. This is one of the things that I really needed to see from the Chargers offense this week, and it's the utilization of their star talent. It feels like a lot of the times, especially, with the injuries and stuff, we've not been able to feature a lot of dudes because they just weren't there. And even when they were there, it feels like design-wise, play-wise, they weren't getting as involved as we were once hoping. This week, that was not the case. Herbert was not afraid to feature his weapons, and I'll be honest, there was a ton of horrible play calling by Joe Lombardi, but there was a pocket of really nice ones too, right? Especially that 2-point conversion to seal the game. We'll talk about that later. But featuring these guys is the most important thing you can do with the players that you actually have on your roster. We're still missing a couple stars, but the ones that are back have definitely seen their share of touches. Eckler, Allen, Carter, Palmer, these guys were peppered with targets by Justin Herbert. 28 targets combined, which is pretty impressive. And of course, we'll call him the missile of this offense, the guy that definitely carries the offense in terms of him and Justin Herbert being consistent. Austin Eckler was a beast on Sunday as expected. Okay, 80 total yards and a clutch last-minute touchdown in the flat. That's the only thing I feel like I'm okay with in terms of playing the short game for the Chargers. Justin Herbert is not a dink and dunk quarterback, okay? To see him utilized like that almost exclusively seems criminal, right? It's malpractice when you have a quarterback like number 10. But at the same time, if you got a guy like Austin Eckler, he's one of the few guys that I feel confident, like, okay, pass it to the underneath. You're going to see some success with Austin Eckler like 8 out of 10 times, and those are pretty good odds. Austin Eckler once again went out there, put on a big performance, and once again help the Chargers climb out of the hole to try and find themselves a last-second touchdown to seal the win. That was absolutely insane. Lastly, I will say on user stars, Keenan Allen. He continues to improve the health of this drive every single week, too. Health of every drive every single week. And having him back on the field has definitely been a huge clutch improvement for the Chargers, especially on third down. He only had 49 yards and a touchdown, but can't think of a single play that he was involved in that wasn't clutch in some way. And that's what's going to help segue us to our next segment called the Keenan Allen effect. Okay, Keenan's presence has lifted this offense dramatically. And this is a great example of what can happen when you get just one guy back on your team that the whole scheme is designed around. Third down conversions have gone up almost 10%. And I know that may seem like a low number to most of you, but that's really dramatic in terms of the NFL. Huge. That's the kind of impact a guy like Keenan Allen can have individually. And his contributions have sustained multiple drives over the last 2 weeks. The Chargers, one of the most eye-soaring experiences that you can have as a spectator, is seeing them squander multiple drives because they just go 3 and out. They go, maybe 1 first down and have to punt the ball. It kind of sucks to see that kind of momentum sucked away. We saw plenty of that this game as well. I think most of that had to do with play design, but Keenan Allen has improved our odds in converting in those situations, which has been so clutch for so many reasons. But most importantly, I feel like Keenan's contributions also continues to help free up other players on this roster too. Other receivers are seeing a bit more availability due to just Keenan Allen existing out there on the turf. First, Palmer last week, right? He opened up that game with the touchdown. He went crazy for 120 yards and a score. I think multiple scores actually. And then this week it was DeAndre Carter who saw a bit of softer coverage this game and helped the Chargers with his availability get open and contributed to that win pretty heavily. So Keenan Allen just alone, even without Mike Williams on the field yet, has absolutely improved this offense in terms of availability and uplifting other talent like Josh Palmer, DeAndre Carter, other receivers, and their availability on the field. So great to see number 13 back, and it can only get better. Hopefully he stays healthy, knock on wood, but it can only get better with other guys like Mike Williams on their way back as well. Now, what about a guy that didn't have the craziest day? Well, G7. This segment called G7 at the last minute. For the most part, Gerald Everett was largely absent this week, which is really head-scratching for a lot of folks because, of course, the Arizona Cardinals' passing defense isn't the best in the NFL, and I certainly do think the tight end should have been more involved. But I actually think this may have more to do with his limited availability due to his recent injury. If you guys didn't know, G7 was kind of a late green light player onto the roster because he was battling, I think it was a hamstring or an ankle, I don't remember. And maybe that had something to contribute to that. Maybe he was on a snap count, I do not know. But he did show up when it counted the most. I know only a couple of catches, but that 2-point conversion, wow, dudes. That was obviously designed to go to the tight end, and it was executed to perfection. Still, this begs the question if the Bolts should pursue a tight end in the upcoming 2023 draft. I don't know. Let me know your guys' thoughts on that. I feel like Gerald Everett is definitely a pretty decent stud. He's on the roster for at least one more season after this. I think that if he's available and healthy, he's a definitely good option for Justin Herbert, especially with the other weapons you have around him. So G7, largely absent this game, but he showed up when it counted the most with that 2-point clutch to win it. Next up, we got to talk about Derwin James, man. Holy cow, talk about defensive domination, right? This next segment called Derwin Domination. Derwin was unbelievable this game. And this is exactly the kind of performance I imagined for him at the top of the season. We talked a lot about at the top of the season, the defense being dramatically overturned, right? And that was great, right? I feel like, the hype of J.C. Jackson and Khalil Mack, and it all came together to help Derwin James be that centerpiece of the defense. Now, of course, things didn't work out quite as planned, especially with the J.C. Jackson factor. But at the same time, we've seen a consistency from Derwin James, which is pretty much unmatched in the NFL. I think at this point, Derwin must be viewed, even outside the Chargers fandom, as the best safety in the league. This guy was everywhere. How the Chargers have been able to utilize him this season, again, is one of the few things that have held up in terms of hype to translation to the actual regular season. 8 tackles this game, a pass defended, an interception, and a forced fumble. It's really crazy to see how consistently Derwin James has been contributing to Chargers victories. I know we have only got 6 on the season so far, but in every single one of those, you have to admit Derwin James made some kind of an impact. This game in particular. Now, those 2 takeaways versus Arizona, especially the pick that you're seeing here in the photo versus DeAndre Hopkins, this has completely turned the game on its head in terms of how the Chargers can find momentum. Because at this point of the game, I should say the Chargers were really struggling to find that rhythm. And Derwin James is one of those guys that can jumpstart a unit, especially on this defense that was certainly struggling versus the run. Now, the Chargers, this kind of gives me like that broad spectrum view of both the offense and defense. They have 2 extremely good things going for them right now. Herbert on the offense, of course, who we talked about, and then Derwin on the defense. And this is why I feel like this team is in a pretty decent spot personnel-wise. It doesn't mean that guys like Tom Telesco, Brandon Staley, Joe Lombardi are not on the hot seat, but at the same time, you got 2 very good foundations to build on, right? Behind these 2 players, the Bolts will always have something to build on. Derwin James is by definition a quarterback of the defense. This guy is absolutely a leader. Their leadership and skill keep the Bolts in every game. And those are 2 positions of the highest quality you're going to find at quarterback and safety. And Derwin's shockingly consistent big play ability also continues to grow, which is also mind-boggling. So huge ups to Derwin James. Huge performance in this game. And what's crazy is I think his best is still ahead of him. This will certainly be one of his best games of the season, but Derwin just continues to grow as one of those huge difference makers in the NFL. Now, what didn't go so great for the Chargers on Sunday? Well, I think the biggest thing most fans will agree on is that run defense. And unfortunately, Chargers fans, I got to tell you, I don't think the run defense is improving anytime soon. It's a big yikes out there. The Bolts gave up almost 200 yards to the Cardinals, and this is something that we've already seen several times this season. Multiple, close to, if not surpassing 200 yards on the ground versus opponents is very, very bad. As a matter of fact, James Conner. We're in the Skynet universe all of a sudden. James Conner, running back for the Cardinals. His season high up until this game was 69 yards in a single game. Crazy, right? Especially considering that he ran for 120 yards on Sunday. Oh my goodness, Chargers. We have got to sort something out on the run D. Kyler Murray also tacked on another 56 yards and a score on the ground. This spells to me, a pattern that we're not going to break out anytime soon. I think this is going to be one of the constants that the Chargers have to be aware of in future matchups. Because the Bolts' best chance at staying ahead of this problem in terms of just allowing ridiculous numbers of yards on the ground ahead of them is to stay ahead on the scoreboard, right? And that's a tough thing to ask. We still have guys like Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, and Derrick freaking Henry ahead of us this season in terms of matchups. This is not good. And the Chargers and its fans, we're going to have to start expecting all of those matchups to kind of be massacres in terms of what we allow in run D. Now, fortunately, outside of Tennessee, I would say, those matchups, the Colts, the Raiders, the other guys don't have the craziest running backs, but they're still decent teams. Outside of those matchups, or I should say those matchups are against lesser teams, right? Those lesser teams, I think the Chargers still have a pretty good chance of winning despite those beastly running backs. But Tennessee and Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor with the Colts, this is crazy. Our weak run defense could spell disaster in those weeks if we're not careful. So just, I guess, bottom line, Chargers fans, just be aware of the situation. I don't see this improving anytime soon. So the Chargers are going to have to find a way to stay ahead despite that blatant weakness that pretty much every opponent is going to try and exploit for the rest of the year. Hopefully this in some way, shape, or form improves in 2023. Next up, this segment called Despite the Play Calling. We're still going to have to figure this out. I posted this on Twitter right before getting on here. Our first quarter play calling was among the worst I have seen in 2022, which is saying something. We've seen some pretty atrocious play calling this season. This was one of the worst I've seen. The Joe Show was in full effect as we saw screen after swing after short pass attempted. It was nuts out there. And as you guys can see in the first 3 possessions, 15 yards, 3 yards, minus 7 yards. Altogether, what? We're looking at like 15 yards or less in total offense in the first 3 possessions. One of those starting at the opponent 47. That's unacceptable. That's absolutely unacceptable. This scheme, in my opinion, especially when it comes to those short game design throws, they just do not work. And it doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon either, which is very troubling. Again, the Chargers' first 3 possessions under like 15 yards. We need to break out of this insane habit of forfeiting an entire quarter each game. You guys know what I'm talking about. Whether it be the first quarter, the third quarter, the fourth quarter, the Chargers seem to not be able to find any rhythm in a full quarter of play. If you guys remember on Sunday, after the first quarter, the Chargers did start to gain some momentum, and they were able to build off that. But that whole quarter, that's a lot to give up every single week. I can't think of one game this season where we played consistently for all four quarters. That's crazy. Not a one game this season. And in all of our close games, that one quarter could have made the big difference of a win or a loss. I think Herbert is starting to itch for something a little bit different too. He's being misused. On a design wide receiver screen in this game, he instead targeted Keenan Allen out deep. Keenan Allen was running that runoff, trying to open up a little bit of space, maybe as a diversion. And instead of dunking it down to the wide receiver like he was asked to, Justin Herbert instead passed it out deep to Keenan Allen. That's what he wants to do. That's what he's designed to do. He's not designed to be a dink and dunk quarterback. Alongside the offense, if we want to move on from that, the offense is just atrocious. We have to figure it out, especially in terms of giving up a full quarter every game. That needs to improve. Use Justin Herbert appropriately. But aside from the offense, the defense also saw its issues as well. Yes, the run defense will always be bad. We talked about that. But I saw several personnel decisions bite us in the butt as well. That was not good. I saw at one point Kenneth Murray lined up against Marquise Brown. That's going to be troublesome, dudes. That's trouble spelled all over the place, written on the wall. One of the fastest receivers in the NFL versus a linebacker that's not great in coverage. I think that did result in a first down for the Cardinals as well. That's not good. Personnel is always something that gets me scratching my head. The lack of use of, I would say, Xander Horvath, the misappropriate use of Justin Herbert. It's all very head-scratching in offense. On defense, we actually do see a lot of that too. I do have to admit, though, the way we use Derwin makes me feel a little better overall. That's one of the best usage of players I've seen in the NFL right now. But still, the play calling overall was poor. We needed to point that out. And our players stepped up to make it work. So that tells me that the roster is pretty solid even with the injuries. The play calling is really what's holding the team back right now. And that ultimately could be the thing that shoots us in the foot, that keeps us from the postseason. The play calling, the coaching, it has to improve. But there is a bit of hope that it maybe could. This next segment called Remember, the 4th of Staley November. Okay? The 4th in Staley November. That's what I'm talking about, Staley. You guys remember the Brandon Staley effect last season? It felt like, yeah, the Chargers, dude, they're that loose cannon, that wild card, kept us pretty unpredictable. Since then, we've become one of the more predictable teams in the NFL. But in this game, it feels like the big play Staley, could see a return. Because that big play Staley, it feels like it's been in hibernation for most this season. One of the biggest reasons I loved the signing of Brandon Staley and the early things that we saw of him in his career last season, in his debut season for the Chargers as a head coach. It feels like these gutsy calls were something unique and exciting for the Chargers. Some of them we loathed him for, others we loved him for. But for the most part, I felt like we were moving in the right direction in terms of when to apply these situations. Sure, there have been many that were obvious mistakes, things that I do not agree with, but I felt that he would improve in his situational awareness over time. That was something I was like, okay, last season we had our ups and downs, there were some hiccups, but maybe he will improve in his second season, his follow-up season in 2022. And that just kind of wasn't the case. As we saw these decisions continue to worsen in terms of their risk and reward factor, it made me feel a little bit more upset in what the lack of Brandon Staley, retaliation that we were seeing. Until we eventually saw these situations disappear completely. We weren't really seeing these risks rewards anymore. And Sunday, I feel like we saw a glimmer of what made me love Brandon Staley to begin with. That 4th down decision to go for 2 and the win was absolutely the right call. It had gutsy written all over it. And with the Chargers and how they were gaining momentum in that previous drive, it was absolutely the right call. So this gives me some hope. And it's a hope that this game reminds me of Staley, what makes him bold in the NFL. I really hope this reminds him of his identity as a coach. And I hope it helps him clean up that identity just a little bit. It's not just enough to be that risk taker. You have to be that calculated risk taker. And that's the biggest upside I loved about Brandon Staley. He's going to learn as he goes. He's going to find a way that these risk rewards play in his favor in the long run. That went away for a long time. I'm hoping that this is that reminder that sometimes things can pay off. Follow those analytics aggressively if necessary. Take those risks. Become that coach that the Chargers were hoping to see. And again, try and lesser those mistakes that we saw through the first season. Clean those up and build on it. We're not completely giving up on Brandon Staley. I understand the lore of a Sean Payton at this point, but we're hoping the Chargers make it into the postseason. I'm sure I'm not going to find a single fan that's like, yeah, I hope the Chargers fail and they don't make it into the postseason again with Justin Herbert. I can imagine finding a fan like that. So in return, we need to be rooting for Brandon Staley in some way, shape, or form as well, because his success is the Chargers' success, and I'll never root against the Bolts. Speaking of which, a spark of momentum. Now, the Chargers, despite a close 4th quarter, found a way to win this game. That's uncharacteristic for the Chargers. And 6-5 is by no means a bad record, especially going into the second half of the season. Next, we're going to face the Raiders, the Dolphins, the Titans, the Colts, Rams, and Broncos. That's the last 6 games of the season. And of those games, I believe the Chargers are capable of winning at least 4 of them. That's not too bad, dude. This provides a big opportunity for the Chargers to build on this win. Because believe it or not, the Chargers are in a great position to make their first postseason appearance in the Herbert era. And that's a really big deal. And with talent like Mike Williams, Joey Bosa returning very soon, it buys time for this team to strike back at full health. So the timing is perfect. What are our odds, right? I know a lot of Chargers fans have been asking me, like, Director, can we maybe take a look at the odds, see what things are looking like? Well, here's our first playoff watch of the season, okay? And I know we're going to see that comment a lot in the comment section. Playoffs! Well, hear me out for a second, okay? The Chargers are sitting around a 50% chance of making the postseason right now at 6-5. Not too bad, right? Could be better, though. But if you take a look at the rest of the AFC, their chances are actually pretty decent. The Chargers, I would say maybe if they can win the next 5 of their 6 games, they're almost guaranteed to go in. If they can win their next 4 of their 6 games, they have around an 80% chance. Things are looking pretty good right now. But to kind of prove it, here's my playoff outlook for the Chargers on the ESPN playoff, machine or whatever. I went through all of the games, and this is kind of what I came up with. Okay? The Chargers here, with the way I laid everything out, became the 6th seed at 10-7. Okay, with Buffalo in first, you guys can kind of see how everything laid out there. Don't pay too much attention to the NFC. I kind of went through with my heart there. I don't know the NFC as well as I do the AFC, but this is kind of what came out to at 10-7. The Chargers in the 6th seed, still in it, still able to get in there. Again, maybe with a bit of a healthier roster, that's not looking too bad. To kind of give you guys a preview, too, of what could happen. Let's say the Chargers in Week 15 do take down the Tennessee Titans. That still keeps them at 11-6 and in the 6th seed, right? So I'm thinking the Chargers do need to win at least, 4 out of their next 6 games to get into the postseason? Because let's say we do lose one more. What one do I have winning that we could maybe lose? Let's say the Chargers do lose to the Colts, right? Then we're out of the postseason. The Chargers need to find a way, again, versus this particular pocket of opponents to close the season. I think we are absolutely capable of winning 4 out of 6 games. 10-7 is not a terrible record. And again, it's more about the situation you're going to be in if you make it into the postseason. It's about getting into the postseason at this point rather than, okay, we got to figure out what we're going to do once we get in. You got to get in. Because at that point, the situation does improve. So to help close out this video, let's expand on that a little bit, okay? This game was close, too close. But in the end, it has firmly kept the Chargers in the playoff conversation. And with 4 of our next 6 games looking absolutely winnable, this is the chance the Bolts have been waiting for. And this is how we expand on that. Imagine we get Mike Williams back next week versus the Raiders. That's huge. And that's absolutely possible. Let's say we get Joey Bosa back the week after that. He was scheduled to be back versus the Raiders. Not too sure. If he is back, he might be on a snap count, but not too sure what the timeline looks on that. But let's say he does come back the week after that versus the Dolphins. Having them both back available versus the Dolphins and the Titans could cause a huge swing. Because if we're being honest, with one or either of them back, those games are going to be extremely tough in my opinion, right? If we don't get either of them back, if we don't get both of them back, the Titans and the Dolphins, those are extremely tough matchups. But if they're both ready to take on the toughest remaining teams in our schedule, I can't excuse the possibility of the Chargers making a run. And I'm talking a string of wins, especially if Bosa is ready, guys. That would be absolutely massive versus a quarterback like Tua or Ryan, who have a combined sacks, or who have a combined 38 sacks this season. Having both those guys back is huge. So my point here is we are a lot closer to that preseason outlook from what we look like at the top of the season, right? What we look like on the surface right now looks like we're in a lot of trouble. But we're actually closer to that hype look that we were seeing at the top of the season. Because the Bolts bought themselves another week to get healthy. And the timing is everything. If they can continue to build on this momentum next week versus the Raiders, which the odds are looking pretty good on that, then we should look especially ready to take on Miami and Tennessee. And if we win just one of those games, our playoff hopes skyrocket to almost guaranteed. Stay strong, Bolt fam. The Chargers, we're not done. And even though it's hard to see it on the surface right now, we are a rising power with every star-studded player we get back on the field. Because I cannot stress this enough. The Chargers look dramatically different with Joey Bosa opposite of Khalil Mack. The Chargers look dramatically different with Mike Williams opposite Keenan Allen. And those days are just on the horizon, just around the corner. And who knows? If we make it into the postseason, there's a chance that maybe we even see a guy like Rashawn Slater back. Right? And then, maybe, just maybe, this team will be ready for not just a push, but a deep playoff push at that. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, we got to take care of business now. And perhaps the most important factor of all, the coaching must improve. Because the window is here. It's time for Staley and Lombardi to step up. Their jobs are on the line. But do not be fooled. The Chargers are in it. They've got to stay consistent. They got to find a way to stay off of the run game in terms of their opponent. They have to keep that under control if at all possible, or at least stay ahead of them. And they got to make sure the coaching is clean and consistent. Because we're getting stars back. Joey and Mike, that's a huge deal. The opponents, the particular opponents we have to close the season, that's a huge deal. The Chargers just need to execute. And I feel like they're capable of that. The players are stepping up. If the system can improve, I feel like we got a solid chance at the postseason. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let me know what your guys' record for the Chargers is at this point. I have the Chargers at 10-7. I think their ceiling is certainly 11-6, which is not bad at all. That's almost guaranteed into the postseason. But they got to clean some stuff up. You guys let me know in the comment section below. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you liked what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Let's go, Chargers! Justin Herbert, dude, the social media quarterback. Let's see what you have to come up with next.